Hi everyone. Today we're with Asha Bhatia. She is a senior finance executive and a partner at FCM. Asha, could you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm the eldest of three children. My parents grew up in India, so our heritage is from India, from Rajasthan. And I currently split my time between Chicago and Florida. I have a niece and a nephew, and I love basketball. So go Pacers. They're in the playoffs right now.
Awesome. Awesome. So can you tell me what is the most exciting part of your job?
Yeah, I like the well, there's quite a few things I like about my job, my current job, but I like the variety, the impact, and the flexibility. So variety means we see a lot of different industries, a lot of different business models. Impact because what we do directly impacts the bottom line, which then largely the private equity firm can monetize. So most of our work is done for private equity clients. Um, and and yeah, so that those are probably the biggest things. And then the flexibility I have because we're a smaller company, so 53, 54 people. So when there's days when my niece says, "Can Asha can you come over for a play date on the middle of a Friday afternoon?" I say yes.
That's
And
awesome.
so that's nice.
Awesome. And I understand that before coming to FCM, you were at GE and you were also at HSBC. What are some of the learnings from these experiences that have sort of shaped your perspective and how you approach your work?
Yeah, so both great companies, very different companies. I like to say I grew up in GE. So right
Mhm.
after undergrad, I joined GE. And that was a great training ground, despite what, recent press articles have said about the breakup of GE. It was a wonderful experience. I joined the financial management program, which was an intense training in operational aspects of finance. That was a 2-year program, and then I did our what was corporate audit staff at the time, which was their management acceleration program. And
Mhm.
you got to travel the world, see different businesses, plopped into a business for 4 to 5 months at a time. You had to meet with the CEO, CFO, the sort of the operating leadership team of the business, and provide value and insight in a matter of 4 months. So and every time was a new manager, a new team. So lots of feedback every 4 months, which I know Sherry has talked about in some of her articles as well that she's written. And it was really, I think, the key to where I am right now was my time at GE. At HSBC, I joined sort of when I was mid-career at GE. We were going through a sale of the company I was the CFO of. And so at that point, I exited with the sale. I exited GE with the sale, and then I joined HSBC. Ian Mackay had become the CFO of North America. He was a longtime mentor, friend, and a boss of mine at GE. So he brought me over. And there it was completely opposite. It was a British company with operations in the US. It didn't run really like one single operating company. It ran like a diversified, holding company with a diversified set of companies. And one of my jobs there was to help to bring more structure to the retail arm of HSBC. So I worked on the transformation, and then I became the CFO of HSBC North America, the retail bank, for 3 or 4 years. And my learning there was about how to use what I had learned at GE and influence, drive change, but also work in a completely different environment. So the the UK based environment was a lot more collegial, consensus building, versus the US direct, this is a mission we're going to go after. If you have some objections, say those, but then otherwise you execute the mission. It was very different at HSBC, and it allowed me to build some of those other skills that I didn't really have from GE in terms of consensus building, the softer skills, which was helpful.
Awesome. And I'm curious, like you talked about a lot of learning, but learning new things. What was something that you didn't expect to learn? in your like positions like at both at GE and HSBC?
Yeah, so I would say at GE, I didn't know anything, right? I mean, you think you know a lot when you graduate college, you really don't. And so there it was learning, intense learning about both the function of finance, but also learning things like communication, chain of command communication, keeping people abreast along the way, raising your hand and saying if something's not right, raising your hand and speaking up, even if you're the only voice in the room. It was about raising your hand to do the things that nobody else wanted to do. One of the first assignments I had on audit staff was in Canton, Ohio, and I was the second or third choice for that job because I guess the other people that they wanted to go there didn't want to go. So I went, and it was a great experience. I got to work directly with the controller. I learned about shutting down a site and what that entails. And you don't get those experiences if you sort of just play it safe. So I learned that at GE big time. And at HSBC, I learned again, I already had the global experience, but I learned navigating sort of a completely different environment. I learned about influencing on a global scale when you're trying to build a retail bank as a truly an operating company with metrics, with consistent management structures, with consistent products and services. That was something that I hadn't had a chance to do at GE. So that was great learning at HSBC.
Awesome. Do you have any words of advice for people looking to enter like consulting or finance?
I would say be humble. Always look for who you can learn from. You can learn from your peers as much as you can learn from your superiors. I think sometimes people forget that you can learn from each other and build a community and help each other. I still call on people that I worked with 20 years ago. And that's been a great network, and they've grown, I've grown, and it's been great. And then what I referenced before, which was sometimes taking the job that nobody else wants will pay dividends in big ways, both from a learning and a visibility stuff. Because if you think about it, if you go in something that's broken and messy and you can make a difference and fix it, that will go a lot farther, both in terms of recognition and your own development, than sort of taking the stable, steady job where your changes are just going to be incremental. So take risks,
Mm,
get noticed, and it'll pay dividends.
that's a great piece of advice.
Mhm.
And just transitioning to more AAPI Heritage Month questions, how has your heritage shaped the person you are today?
So I think there's been both good and bad in terms of the heritage. And of course the good is solid family foundation, solid focus on education. I mean, if you're not an engineer or doctor, what are you, right? In an Indian family, which I was neither. So but like the education is very important, the foundations are very important. And I think that's good because a lifelong desire to learn, kind of stays with you. I think the other good things are humility in terms of the Asian, or at least in terms of I can't speak for all Asians, but in terms of my family background, the humility and just sort of um, trying to respect and learn from your elders and others is an important part of our culture. And so I think those are good things. I think that can be a double-edged sword sometimes too, where sometimes you need to speak up and sometimes you need to push back on what you would regard as your superior or, a higher up in the organization. And that's a skill that I've had to learn, working in an American company and a British company where that's not necessarily their culture, and then be able to bridge sort of the learnings from the Western. And I was born and raised in the US, but grew up in a very Indian family, like to the extent that we watched Indian TV, listened to Indian music, like, it was very much like a microcosm of India within the US.
Mm,
And so to blend the two heritages together has been has been good. I mean, I think I can bring things to the table that others might not see things the same way as I do, but equally I've had to stretch myself to learn to be a little bit more I wouldn't say confrontational, but edgy, and push back on things that, just don't make sense just because you're a superior.
Yeah, yeah, definitely in my culture, I see that too.
Yeah.
So does your family have any traditions that are especially important to you?
Yeah, so my family celebrates Diwali, so that's kind of an
Mm,
important culture. It's the festival of lights. It's like the New Year. So my grandma, she's 96. She still lives with us, so she brings a lot of the tradition to the family. Because I'll be honest, like we didn't grow up as a very religious family, so it was more
mhm,
about like some of the cultures that she would sort of tell us this is important. Another important festival for us is Raksha Bandhan, which is it's a festival between brothers and sisters, and it's where the
mhm,
sister sort of prays for the health and long life for the brother, and then the brother gives a gift to the sister, as a thank you for that. And so that's a tradition that I've always enjoyed, and I've now started it for my niece and nephew. So I host an annual party for that as well. So those are a couple things.
cool, awesome.
Mhm.
Who are the role models or mentors that have influenced you or helped guide you?
Yeah, so actually to the from GE, so Sherry is actually one of them, and I'll tell you a little story. So I was on my third year, no, I was in my second year of audit staff, which is your associate level. And
Hmm.
then at that point, you can either get promoted to audit manager or you go back into the business. And it's like 80 people go to 30 from an audit manager year. So I had been selected to get to the third year, but I had said, look, I've done enough of this traveling, and I don't want to do it anymore. I'm just gonna leave audit staff. And Sherry had worked with me, or knew of me. I don't know if we had even directly worked together at the time, but she sort of called me and she said, look, I need to meet you and at the next conference. And she sat me down and she said, what are you doing? She said, you need to stay for the third year, because that's really important for your career. And she kind of listened to all of the reservations I had, and she said, no, I think this will be good for you to stay and do this. And so I actually changed my decision and stayed. And I had some issues at the time. I don't remember exactly, but there was a family member was sick, and I couldn't sort of start right away. And she worked all of that out seamlessly, no impact to me, and really supported me in my career. So I'll never forget that. I think that made a big difference in terms of the job I'm in now. I don't think I would have had that job if I hadn't sort of continued down the path of audit staff. And
Hmm.
she's the one who convinced me to do that. And then and that just showed me, like reaching back down and helping others that are more junior to you and lifting them up and caring for their development, I think is a good skill to have and demonstrate and pay it forward. And she's clearly done that as part of uh, the foundation that you're a part of as well, Live Girls. So, I see that wasn't just a one-off, but it's sort of a lifelong trait of hers, and I respect that. And then the other person that I think fondly of is Ian Mackay. So I mentioned he ultimately became the global CFO for HSBC, but I had worked with him on audit staff and then again at GE Money. And what I learned from him was just how he interacted with people and the teams. Anytime, even when he was in the global CFO position, if I reached out to him, he would call me or text me or email me within a couple of days, if not the same day. And then when I talked to him, he actually listened. Like he would thoughtfully listen to what I had to say and then provide his feedback or perspective or advice. And I was so impressed by that because he was in such a senior position, but super easy to talk to, accessible, and really made a big difference in my career as well. I mean, he's the one who brought me from GE to HSBC. he kind of guided me through that interview process and then continued to help follow my career and push me, to where I got to. So there'd probably be two people that I greatly respect and admire, and have helped me in my career.
Awesome. I can definitely attest that Sherry has been such an impactful role model, at least in Live Girl. So that's awesome to hear. Um, I'm just wondering, at the intersection of being both a woman and an Asian, how do you feel like that identity sort of shapes your experiences in the workplace?
Um, I think thought diversity is probably for me more important than the demographic diversity. And I definitely think that the experiences I've had growing up, the experiences I have as a female shape how I think about things for sure. And that thought diversity is what I can bring to the table. And I think that's a good thing because as you can imagine, in a lot of the tables I sit at, I'm like the only female or one
Yeah.
of a few females. And sometimes I'm the only non-white person in the room. And what I learned, and I forget who taught me this, or somebody at G taught me this very early on. They're like, because I used to be very shy. I didn't speak up. If there was a networking event and the main guy was on one end, I was on the other end of the room. And he taught me, he said, everybody's a human being. Everybody has a dog, they have parents, they have a family, they have somebody, right? And so relate to the human aspect, and that will give you the confidence to reach out and approach them and talk to them. And that confidence then leads to being confident and being able to speak up. So it's great if you have all these thoughts, like you could be the smartest person in the room and have a very diverse viewpoint, but if you don't actually say it at the time that it needs to be said, it's lost, right? Because nobody benefited from your wisdom and your experience. So that last part is sometimes the hardest part because you're like, oh, there's a lot of people in the room. Should I say something? Will I look stupid? And that's a big thing, at least for, me growing up, you never wanted to look stupid. And that was a learning that I had, but I think that it's important. Once I learned that skill, then I think I'm able to contribute more because I have the blend of my experience and my heritage, but also willing to vocalize it.
Mm, could not agree more.
Mm.
And just winding down to our last question, what does AAPI Heritage Month mean to you?
Um, I think it's a good reminder to take a pause, reflect on the heritage, and reflect on giving back to people. So I think this was a wonderful opportunity for someone like you to reach out and take time out of your day and try to get me to think about, how can I give back or what can I do differently? So I think reflection was probably the most important thing for me. And, it's been a lot of strides have been made in the field in terms of women's and Asians getting to senior levels. And so just doing more of that, getting more women on boards, getting more Asians on boards, getting more women and Asians on leadership teams. I think that should be a goal. And I hope that we continue as a community to move in that direction.
Awesome. All right, Asha, thank you so much for answering my questions. Thank you for hopping on to Live Girls AAPI Heritage Month interview. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.